just first want to thank Ivan and Deirdre for their introduction and indeed for their invitation to address this conference. I suppose I took up this role on the 1st of March, so it's still fairly new, and part of what I'm trying to do, this is a new body we're establishing, and communicating what it's about, how we're planning to go about that and what its role will be and what difference it will make is very much part of the job. So having the opportunity to do that today here at the Wheels annual conference is fantastic, so grateful for that. I've entitled my talk Getting Started in Charities Regulation. It's supposed to be a deliberately slightly provocative title because, of course, I guess the ones who are getting started in charities regulation are us in the Charities Regulatory Authority. Charities regulation has been familiar to all of you in many different ways through the work you do with your charities. I know that charities already are answerable to many different regulators depending on what sector they're in. There is also, as we've heard earlier this morning, and I'm sure we'll hear more about, a huge sector-led approach to self-regulation through governance codes and so on. Part of what our job will be to fit into that landscape, to add value to that landscape, to avoid duplicative practices, which is the last thing hard-pressed charities want to engage in. That's going to be a challenge for us, and it's something that we will need to maintain the dialogue on. So we're the ones who are getting started, and in that sense, we will need to learn from you as we go ahead, and obviously from others who are further down the road of charities regulation in other jurisdictions. And I plan to be frantically taking notes during Jude and Francis's presentations. But for us, it feels very much like a beginning. And what I want to use my time here today to do is to give you a little bit of a who, what, when, where, why, and how, what we're at and what we plan to be doing, and then talk a little bit about how I see that fitting in with the overall governance effort and the overall drive to rebuild trust and to increase transparency and accountability in the sector. So just a little bit of the facts. Charities Regulatory Authority, coming under the Charities Act 2009, not yet established. I mean, we've a few recent milestones that are fantastic. I've been appointed. We've had the board appointed by the Minister on the 30th of April. So we have a 16-member board, and we have a small initial staffing complement from within the Department of Justice. But what this will be, it's an independent regulator for charities. We've our independent board, so it's under the Department of Justice and Equality, but will be functionally independent, and Chief Executive, myself, and an administrative staff. Our functions, I'll just quickly recap, registration, and I want to talk a bit more about that because that's the big priority for us to start off with. But also, we have powers on monitoring. We have extensive enforcement powers in terms of investigations and compliance work that we can carry out. All of that will come in due course. It's not the priority right now. But also advisory functions, advice, provision of advice to charities, provision of advice to members of the public. We are also charged with taking over the Charity Commissioner's services, and that's something that as soon as we are formally established in legislation, which will be later this year, those services will come to us as well, and any of you who've been dealing with the commissioners will instead be dealing with us. So where are we? We're now in the Department of Justice for now on Stephen's Green, and we also have staff down in the Charity Commissioner's offices in Clare Street. We will be merging into a new Dublin-based office accommodation, yet to be determined. That's one of the many things we have in progress at the moment. And we'll be, rolling out this range of statutory functions in the months and years ahead. Okay, so the steps to implementation, what we're going to see from this point here out into the months ahead, and what charities can expect to see coming from our office. As I said, we're not yet open for business. That will occur when we have a commencement order for the relevant pieces of the Charities Act, and our planning is that will be in the fourth quarter of this year, so you can expect to hear further about that. That will establish us formally in law. and will, transform me from CEO designate to CEO, and will transform our board from a board which is not yet established in law to one which is and has all of its responsibilities and functions under the Charities Act. So we expect that to happen somewhere October, November time. But the big, I suppose, in terms of the delivery, the hard delivery, what is the first big thing we need to deliver? It is the Register of Charities, the long-awaited Register of Charities. And that's the focus of our work at the moment. So we're currently developing a system for an online Register of Charities. It will first be based on all of those charities who have a CHY number, and we will be reaching out to all those charities starting around the middle of this year and going on into the autumn to verify the information that we have on those charities from revenue. So, to all of those of you who have your CHY number, you can expect to be hearing from our office in that sort of a time frame from the middle of the year into the autumn, and we'll verify the information we have and use that as a basis for the first Register of Charities. So far, so straightforward, but I think, I don't want to underestimate the progress that will represent, because this is something we haven't had before. We haven't had a comprehensive statutory register of all charities in Ireland that is available to the public, that members of the public, funders, donors, volunteers, whatever, can go in and access information that emanates from a government body that tells them basic facts about their charity. So I think that will be progress, and it will be the core building block to this increase in transparency and accountability, which is at the heart of the Charities Act. But equally, I don't want to underestimate the work that's involved in there, because it hasn't been done before, we're bound to encounter, unexpected things along the road, and one of the things I'm very keen that we get this right, that we publish, when we come to publish a register, that we publish a register that is comprehensive, that is robust, and that people can have confidence in, and that is useful, that it adds value to what we know already about the charity sector. So once we have that initial register in place, we'll move to publish that. I'm being very elastic about my dates on that, but we're hoping for early 2015. But as I say, the priority for us is to get it right. And after that, once the Register of Charities is published, then the reporting obligations under the Charities Act will kick in for all registered charities. And in that context, we'll be developing an activity and financial reporting framework in consultation with the sector itself. So I suppose what that means in effect for you, I've passed over my publication of register, what that means in effect is that you can expect your obligations under the Charities Act to start to kick in early next year. And I think it's useful to think about it in those terms. I don't want to give an absolutely definitive time frame, because, there are unknowns there, and I want to be sure we get it right. But equally, I think it's important that you've some indicative idea of the speed that we're moving at. So that's what I would say. We will, of course, be, once the register is published, we'll be reaching out to the other charities, inviting them to come forward for registration, charities that aren't registered with revenue, and we'll be doing some communication around that so that everyone can know what to expect. On the reporting frameworks have yet to be developed. Obviously, we have the overall high-level framework of the Charities Act, but transforming that into a meaningful, workable, user-friendly reporting framework is going to take us a little bit of time and a lot of input from yourselves, and we'll be producing guidance on that before such time as anybody is required to file reports. So, I just want to give that idea that, there's a process there. None of this is happening overnight, but it is happening. And, we're moving along with these clear milestones in mind, and we'll keep communicating with yourselves on it. And then, obviously, the one that I always want to make sure is in on the bottom of the slide, the continuing provision of commissioners' services, because that's critical for us. This is a public service that is already being delivered, and that it will be our responsibility to ensure that it continues to be delivered. In terms of the register itself then, what we envisage is an online system whereby charities themselves will manage their own entry on the register, will manage their own information, and will provide all their reports and so on online. That's what we're trying to get to. Okay,
About a minute and a half.
I have a minute and a half. Okay, I'm going to just very quickly, I've kind of said all of this already, I guess. So we will have the main things, I suppose, that we will be presenting to the outside: the public register of charities, activity reports from all charities, which again is something we haven't had before, more better financial information. Now, there's a lot of questions about exactly what that will entail and what type of a financial reporting framework we really want. So, but, you know, the clear objective there is that there will be more and better and more relevant financial information available on charities, and then the provision of information and advice. I suppose the kind of two messages I want to give. That's the who, what, when, where, why, and how. That's what you can expect in the months going ahead. Two messages. I suppose there's bound to be things that we disagree on. You know, we're being established as a regulatory authority, and I'm sure there will be an engagement there, and it will be constructive, and it may be robust, and so on. One of the things we may disagree on, and may have already disagreed on, is the speed of travel. You know, we are having to take this. We are extremely constrained in our resources, and we are having to take this slowly and one step at a time. I'm sure there are many in the room who would like us to be going a lot faster and to be more ambitious and to be able to deliver more quickly. In terms of the scope of what we will be able to deliver in the first 18 months or so. But I guess what we can all agree on is that this is progress. That this is progress, and it's going to take time, and we're going to need your engagement on this. But the direction of travel is clear, and I suppose that's one of the things that I want to leave you in absolutely no doubt about today, because there has been confusion, and there have been delays, and there's been uncertainty about what, you know, where we were heading on this. I think the direction of travel is clear, and the appointment of the board and the establishment of the office is a clear indication that this is coming. It will take us time, but it is where we're headed. So be ready for it, I suppose, is my message. My final point, as I said, we're operating in extreme resource constraints. And so what I want our priorities to be, what we're going to be focused on, are those things that only we can deliver by virtue of our statutory powers. Only we can deliver the Register of Charities. Only we can deliver the statutory reporting obligation that will fall comprehensively to all charities. Those are the things we can deliver. There are things that can also be delivered, you know, that fall within our functions to a degree in terms of education and advice, but that are being, you know, ably delivered at present by the sector itself. And what we want to do there is to support the work of organisations such as the Wheel to deliver that improvement in governance across the sector and to support good practice in charities. So one of the conversations I want to have with you as we go along is, you know, where are our energies best put? And where can we best work with you and support what you're already doing and not duplicate what you're already doing? So that's a conversation I want to have. And finally, just thanks again to the Wheel. The theme for this year's conference being trust. I was asked to talk to you about regulation, but of course, from our own perspective with the Charities Act, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the Act, trust is at the heart of the Charities Act. It's one of the core objectives. And, you know, what we'll be trying to do is to achieve the regulation in such a way that supports the rebuilding of trust, together with all those other initiatives that are underway in the sector to rebuild that trust. So I see it very much as a part of that jigsaw, as part of the overall effort. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.